I'm Robin, and my story begins in a house that never truly felt like home. My mother, a successful dentist at a private clinic, married my father, who worked as a manager in a trading company. When they tied the knot, Dad moved into Mom's house. I came along a year later, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. One day, Dad came home early, his face twisted in anger. "I quit," he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. "That damn boss can find someone else to push around." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The house filled with the sound of the TV and the click-clack of Dad's game controller. The smell of beer became a constant presence. I was young, but I wasn't blind. I saw the way Mom's smile tightened when she came home to find Dad sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty cans. "John, you need to find a job," Mom would say, her voice strained. "I'm looking, Sarah." "What do you want from me?" Dad would shout back. "There's nothing out there that matches my skills and pay grade." Their arguments became a nightly ritual. I'd hide in my room, pillow over my ears, trying to block out their angry voices. During their worst fights, Mom would pack me off to Aunt Lisa's house. Aunt Lisa lived just a 15-minute drive away with Uncle Mark and my cousin Tommy, who was a couple years younger than me. I loved being at their house. It was always warm and filled with laughter. Uncle Mark would teach me and Tommy how to play board games, and Aunt Lisa would bake cookies that filled the whole house with the smell of chocolate and vanilla. "You know you're always welcome here, sweetie," Aunt Lisa would whisper to me as she tucked me in at night. No matter what. Those words were a lifeline. As much as I loved my parents, being at Aunt Lisa's felt more like home than my own house ever did. One day, after a particularly nasty fight, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Lisa in the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Lisa," Mom sobbed. "But I have to try, for Robin's sake." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that I'd be okay if they split up. But the words stuck in my throat. I was just a kid, after all. What did I know about marriage and love? Little did I know, things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. Dad finally got a job, but it came with a catch: lots of business trips. At first, it seemed like a blessing. When Dad was away, the house was peaceful. Mom would help me with my homework, and we'd have quiet dinners together. But as the months went by, I started to notice something was off. The way Mom's face would tighten when Dad called to say he'd be away for another week. The hushed phone conversations she'd have with Aunt Lisa when she thought I couldn't hear. I was barely 8 when my world came crashing down. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and Mom was helping me with my math homework when the doorbell rang. I remember the confusion on her face as she opened the door to a man I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Thompson? I'm Robert Hanson, John's boss," the man said, his voice tight with anger. I watched from the stairs as Mom led him into the living room. Their voices were hushed, but I could hear the tension in every word. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," Mr. Hanson said, "but your husband has been having an affair with my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Mom's hands start to shake. That's impossible," she whispered. "John's been on business trips." Mr. Hanson pulled out an envelope. "I'm afraid not. These are photos of them together. The dates, well, they match up with some of his supposed business trips." I couldn't see the photos from where I was, but I saw Mom's face crumple as she looked at them. Mr. Hanson's voice softened slightly. "I'm divorcing my wife. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Do with this information what you will." After he left, I found Mom sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. When she saw me, she quickly wiped her eyes. "Robin, honey, I need you to go stay with Aunt Lisa for a few days, okay?" Her voice was shaky, but she tried to smile. "Mom and Dad need to have a serious talk." I nodded, not knowing what else to do. As Aunt Lisa drove me to her house, I couldn't shake the image of Mom's tear-stained face from my mind. Days passed, and finally, Mom came to pick me up. Dad wasn't with her. "Where's Dad?" I asked as we drove home. Mom's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Dad and I, we're going to be living apart for a while, sweetheart. We're getting a divorce. I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. For a while, it seemed like things might get better. Mom and I settled into a new routine, just the two of us. But then, everything changed again. It started with Mom feeling tired all the time. Then came the day she found a lump. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, holding Mom's hand as the doctor said the word that would change our lives forever: cancer. "We'll fight this, Robin," Mom said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. Together. But we weren't alone for long. Because just when I thought I'd seen the last of him, Dad came waltzing back into our lives. "I've changed," he said, standing on our doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. "I want to be here for you both." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but Mom let him in. She was too tired, too scared to fight anymore. Life took on a surreal quality after Mom's diagnosis. Our once orderly home became a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and Dad's attempts at playing caretaker. "I quit my job," Dad announced one day, puffing out his chest like he deserved a medal. "Someone needs to take Sarah to her treatments and look after you, Robin." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But even at 9 years old, I could see through his act. The house grew messier by the day, with Dad only bothering to clean when Mom was due back from the hospital. "Robin, sweetie, can you tidy up a bit?" he'd ask, not even looking up from his phone. "Your mom's coming home tomorrow." I did my best, but what could a 9-year-old really do? The dishes piled up, laundry overflowed, and dust gathered on every surface. I wanted to tell Mom, to ask for help, but I couldn't bear to add to her worries. One day, I overheard Aunt Lisa talking to Uncle Mark in hushed tones. "Can you believe that bastard?" she hissed. "He didn't quit, he got fired. His boss kicked him out for sleeping with his wife." My heart sank. It was just another lie in a long string of deceptions. Then came the day that shattered what little faith I had left in my father. Aunt Lisa was driving me home early, Mom was in the hospital for another round of chemo, and Dad was supposed to be waiting for me. We walked into the house without knocking. The sound of giggles and creaking bed springs filled the air. Aunt Lisa's face turned red with fury as we stood there, frozen in the hallway. "John Thompson," she bellowed. "Get your ass out here right now." Dad stumbled out of the bedroom, hastily zipping up his pants. Behind him, a woman I recognized as Mr. Hansen's ex-wife peeked out, clutching a sheet to her chest. "Lisa," Dad said, his voice annoyingly casual. "You're early." Aunt Lisa was shaking with rage. "How dare you? Your wife is fighting for her life, and you're here, you're..." Dad just smirked. "Come on, Lisa. Sarah's sick. A man has needs." I felt sick to my stomach. Aunt Lisa opened her mouth to yell again, but Dad cut her off. "You won't tell Sarah about this," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "It would only make her condition worse. You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" Aunt Lisa's face paled. She grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the house. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Robin," she said as we drove away. "Your father, he's not a good man." I nodded, feeling numb. "I know," I whispered. "I don't love him anymore." For the next year, I lived in a state of constant tension. I'd go to school, pretending everything was normal. I'd visit Mom in the hospital, holding her hand and telling her about my day, carefully omitting anything about Dad. And then, one cold autumn morning, the call came. Mom was gone. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a world that suddenly made no sense. Aunt Lisa held me as I sobbed, while Dad just stood there, looking almost relieved. The day we buried Mom was the hardest of my life. I stood there, numb and hollow, as they lowered her casket into the ground. Dad put on quite a show, sniffling and dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. A week after the funeral, we met with Mom's lawyer. I sat there, picking at a loose thread on my black dress, as the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. "To my beloved daughter, Robin," he said, "I leave all my worldly possessions, including our family home and all my savings." The room went dead silent. I looked up, confused, to see Dad's face turning an ugly shade of purple. "What the hell?" he exploded. "That can't be right. I'm her husband." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid it's all very clear, Mr. Thompson. Your daughter inherits everything. She'll be able to manage the property from the age of 18. Dad whirled on Aunt Lisa, who was sitting beside me. "You," he snarled. "You put her up to this, didn't you? Poisoned her against me." Aunt Lisa just looked at him, her eyes cold. "Sarah knew you, John. She knew you better than you think." We left the office with Dad still ranting. For the next few days, he barely looked at me, like I was the one who had betrayed him. But I was too lost in my grief to care. 3 months crawled by. I was sitting in my room one afternoon, flipping through an old photo album, when I heard unfamiliar laughter from downstairs. Curious, I crept down to find Dad in the living room with a woman I recognized all too well, his mistress, Mr. Hansen's ex-wife. "Robin," Dad said, his voice falsely cheery. "Come meet Candy. She's going to be living with us now." Candy gave me a wide, fake smile. "Hi, sweetie. You should call me Mom from now on, okay?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "She is not my mother," I spat out. Over the next few days, Candy went on a rampage through our house. I watched, helpless and furious, as she packed away all of Mom's photos, her knickknacks, everything that made the house feel like home. "We need to make room for our new family," she chirped, ignoring my glare as she shoved another box of Mom's things into the attic. I retreated to my room, clutching the few photos of Mom I'd managed to save. As I sat there, surrounded by the last remnants of my mother's presence, I made a silent promise: I won't let them erase Mom. Life in what used to be my home became increasingly unbearable. Dad and Candy settled into a lifestyle of lazy indulgence that made my stomach turn. They never worked a day, content to live off the rent from Candy's apartment and the monthly allowance that came into my account, money Mom had left for my care. "See, Robin?" Dad would say, sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "This is the good life. No need to work ourselves to death like your mother did." Candy was no better. She'd spend hours online shopping, boxes of clothes and makeup arriving almost daily. "We deserve nice things," she'd say, modeling yet another new dress. Meanwhile, I was growing out of my clothes, my shoes falling apart. When I'd ask for money for new ones, Dad would scowl. "Christ, Robin, do you ever stop growing? Do you know how expensive it is to raise a teenager?" They'd go on lavish vacations, leaving me behind with Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark. Part of me was relieved to escape the toxic atmosphere at home, but another part felt the sting of rejection. As my 16th birthday approached, I realized I couldn't rely on Dad for anything anymore. I needed my own money, my own independence. That's when I saw the help wanted sign in the window of Joe's coffee shop. That first shift was brutal. My feet ached, my arms burned from carrying trays, and I went home smelling like coffee grounds and dish soap. But I felt a spark of pride I hadn't experienced in years. When I got my first paycheck, I almost cried. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd earned it. "What's this?" Dad asked one day, noticing my new phone. "Where'd you get the money for that?" "I got a job," I said, bracing for his reaction. He snorted. "A job? What do you need a job for?" "We provide everything you need." I bit back a bitter laugh. They provided the bare minimum, spending most of my money on themselves. But I just shrugged. I wanted some extra cash. As the months went by, I worked every shift I could get. I saved every penny, hiding the money in a locked box under a loose floorboard in my room. Slowly, I built up a wardrobe of clothes that actually fit, bought school supplies without having to beg, treated myself to small luxuries like books and art supplies. More importantly, I was building something else: confidence, independence, and a burning determination to take control of my life. As I approached my 18th birthday, a sense of anticipation filled me. Freedom was so close I could almost taste it. But life, as I'd learned, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. It started with the sound of hammering and drilling. I came home from school one day to find the house in chaos, with workers tramping in and out. "What's going on?" I asked, dodging a man carrying a bucket of paint. Candy waddled over, her face flushed with excitement. She grabbed my hands, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, Robin, we have wonderful news. We're having a baby." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad appeared behind her, grinning from ear to ear. "Isn't it great, kiddo? You're going to be a big sister." I forced a smile, feeling more alone than ever. "Yeah, great." As the weeks passed, I watched as they transformed the house. New furniture arrived, walls were repainted, and baby items started appearing everywhere. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. Then, a month before my 18th birthday, everything fell apart. I came home from school, exhausted after a long shift at the coffee shop, to find the door to my room closed. A cute little sign hung on it, reading "Baby's Room" in pastel letters. "Dad? Candy?" I called out, a sense of dread filling me. They appeared from the living room, Candy's pregnant belly leading the way. Dad had a strange look on his face, a mix of satisfaction and determination. "Robin," he said, his voice oddly formal. "Candy and I have been talking. We need your room for the nursery. We think it's best if you move out." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Move out? But, where am I supposed to go? Candy bustled forward, shoving a suitcase into my hands. "Don't worry, I packed your things myself. You should thank me, really. I made sure to include all your important stuff." I opened the suitcase, seeing a jumble of clothes and a few personal items. Everything else, my books, my art supplies, the mementos of Mom, were gone. But this is my home," I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. Dad's face hardened. "Not anymore. It's time for you to grow up, Robin." I fled, suitcase in hand, tears streaming down my face. I found myself at Aunt Lisa's doorstep, sobbing as I told her what happened. Aunt Lisa's face turned stormy. Those. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. "Don't worry, sweetie. You'll stay with us. This isn't over." She marched to the phone and called her lawyer, explaining the situation in rapid-fire words. I sat on the couch, feeling numb as she talked. Finally, she hung up and turned to me, a fierce light in her eyes. "Robin, listen to me. That house? It's yours. Your mother left it to you, remember? You can't officially manage it until you're 18, but in 1 month, you'll be able to do whatever you want with it." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. So they can't just kick me out? Aunt Lisa shook her head. "No, they can't. And once you're 18, you can kick them out." For the first time in years, I felt a smile, a real, genuine smile, spread across my face. 1 month, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Just 1 more month. As I settled into Aunt Lisa's guest room that night, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a growing sense of determination. Dad and Candy thought they'd won, that they'd finally gotten rid of me. But they had no idea what was coming. The morning of my 18th birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that today was the day everything would change. Uncle Mark drove Aunt Lisa and me to the house, my house. As we pulled up, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We marched up to the front door, and I knocked loudly, my heart pounding in my chest. After a moment, the door swung open. Dad stood there, his face darkening when he saw us. Behind him, Candy waddled into view, her pregnant belly even bigger than I remembered. "What are you doing here?" Dad demanded, not even acknowledging that it was my birthday. I straightened my shoulders, looking him directly in the eye. I'm 18 today, Dad. Or did you forget? He scowled. That doesn't explain why you're here. Without a word, I handed him the envelope containing the eviction notice. His face turned red as he read it, his hands shaking with anger. What the hell is this? He shouted. It's an eviction notice, I said calmly. You have 1 month to vacate the premises. Candy burst into tears. You can't do this, she wailed. I'm due in a few weeks. Where are we supposed to go? I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it aside. You have an apartment, don't you? The one you've been renting out? You won't be homeless. They started shouting then, calling me cruel, ungrateful, a monster. I stood my ground, Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark flanking me supportively. We're not leaving, Dad yelled. This is our home. I stepped forward, pushing past them into the house. No, it's not, it's my home. And if you won't leave voluntarily, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. Dad sputtered, I put money into this place. All the renovations. With Mom's money, I reminded him. You haven't spent a dime of your own. He lunged forward, looking like he might actually hit me, but Uncle Mark stepped between us. Dad backed down immediately, the fight going out of him. Candy, still sobbing, tugged on Dad's arm. John, what are we going to do? The tenants in my apartment won't be out for a month. I shrugged, feeling a coldness I didn't know I possessed. That sounds like a you problem. But I'll honor the law. You have 1 month from today, not a day more. We left them standing there, shocked and angry. As we drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life. The month following my 18th birthday was a war of attrition. Dad and Candy, bitter about their impending eviction, did everything they could to make my life miserable. They'd accidentally break dishes, leaving shards for me to clean up. I'd come home to find walls freshly stained with paint splatters, always small enough to be deemed accidental. The house I'd grown up in, the home my mother had lovingly cared for, was becoming a battlefield. Oops, Candy would say with faux innocence, after knocking over yet another vase. Pregnancy makes me so clumsy. I gritted my teeth and endured, counting down the days until I could reclaim my space. Then, one day before their month was up, Candy went into labor. I watched from my window as Dad rushed her to the car, speeding off to the hospital. A plan formed in my mind. I spent the next few hours in a whirlwind of activity. I packed up their belongings, every shirt, every knick-knack, every reminder of their presence. I lugged boxes to the garage, filling it to the brim. Then, I called a locksmith to change the locks. As night fell, I heard a car pull up. Angry voices filled the air, followed by pounding on the door. Robin, open this door right now, Dad's voice boomed. I stood on the other side, heart racing but resolve firm. Your month is up. You need to leave. Are you insane? He shouted. We have a newborn baby. You can't do this. Candy's wails joined the cacophony. Please, Robin, have a heart. For a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered all the times they'd shown me no mercy, no consideration. Your things are in the garage, I called out. I suggest you take them and go to your apartment. If you're not gone in an hour, I'm calling the police. They hurled insults at me, calling me every name in the book. But I stood firm. An hour later, I watched from the window as they loaded their things into their car, Dad red-faced with fury, Candy cradling their newborn and shooting me venomous glares. As they drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a sense of finality. A chapter of my life had closed, and a new one was beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, erasing every trace of Dad and Candy's presence. I restored Mom's photos to their rightful places, feeling her presence with me as I reclaimed our home. When it came time for college, I made the decision to live in the dorms. I wanted to experience life, To be around people my age after years of isolation. Are you sure you want to rent out the house? Aunt Lisa asked as she helped me move into my dorm room. I nodded. It's the practical thing to do. Plus, I don't think I'm ready to live there full time yet. Too many memories. She squeezed my shoulder. I understand. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on the place for you. As I settled into college life, I felt a freedom I'd never known before. I made friends, joined clubs, threw myself into my studies. The weight I'd been carrying for years slowly began to lift. One evening, as I sat in my dorm room studying, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. It was the first I'd heard from him since the eviction. Candy and I are struggling, it read. The baby needs things. Can you help us out? I stared at the message for a long moment, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. Then, with a decisive click, I blocked his number. Some might call it cruel, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't heal if I kept that toxicity in my life. Mom had given me the tools to build a better future, and I intended to honor her memory by doing just that.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.